Hello, everyone.
Hello, Milan.
We were joking over text when we were thinking about doing this because I've known Harmony for almost 25 years. We've known each other almost 25 years, and we've done a lot of interviews over the years, and so it's sometimes kind of funny to have these discussions because I could almost
He has to
answer his
pretend like he
questions.
doesn't know me.
But one of the jokes we had in a text was that I was going to do this with a ventriloquist dummy. It was dressed like you, and I actually did some research trying to get one, but he wouldn't have had the Gucci jacket. Anyway, enough of that. It's cool to have everybody here. We were speaking outside, and I just hope everybody who's in the theater tonight and who've seen the films over the last week, and especially watching Trash Humpers tonight, is that it's very, very rare to ever see Harmony's work projected, especially his older works from his catalog. And there are special moments when it happens, but it's really super, super, super rare. And anytime I ever see anything projected, I go, even though I've seen the films 30 times, because I think they were really designed to be seen in this way. Would you agree?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's always looked better up there. Yeah.
All right, so first question. We've known each other a long time. I think I met you when you were 18, with pre-kids, before you'd even written it. And you weren't even really interested in film at all. At least you weren't talking about it at all. You were writing a lot, like poems, and you were drawing, making like kind of drawings of funny characters. So I'm kind of curious, just, it's always interesting to hear where it all started from. Like what was the first thing that got you interested in film and made you want to actually create them?
Yeah, probably like around the time that I met you was like right before I started right after I graduated high school. So I was probably, I did want to make movies, but you know, at that point, it's like you don't really know anything about how films are made or whatnot. So I used to just like, yeah, I think when I met you, I would draw a lot. I was living in my grandma's basement in Queens, and then I was writing, and it's just kind of like messing around. So I think like I wanted to make movies after pretty early age. Trying to think like what movie made me like want to make movies. I'm not sure, but I think I was like I was skateboarding, and around 16 I knew I wasn't going to be like a great skateboarder, and then I kind of quit and just kind of made a decision I was going to try and make films and try and make art and try and make stuff.
You made like an experimental film when you were in college, right? Isn't there a story that your professor, your writing professor, was like?
That was like
or high school.
Yeah, sophomore in high school. Because I went to the school, the teachers used to like beat you up, you know, and so you really were never told you were good at anything. So I was always told I was bad at everything. And one day I was taking an English course, creative writing course. I think I was like 15 or 16. And I was like asleep in the back of the class, and then this teacher, her name was Miss Bradshaw, she like picked up a short story that I had read, and she called my name, and she was like, but there was one really good story in this class. She was insulting everyone, and then she called my name, and I thought she was gonna, I was gonna get hit, but then really she was giving me a compliment. And then after class she was like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to make movies. And then she said, could you turn this story into a film? And I said, sure. I had no idea. And then she raised a couple $1,000, and then that was a movie for me. And then I made that in high school. My dad showed me how to work a camera and stuff. And then that's kind of how I got a scholarship to NYU, which is how I went to New York. Yeah.
See, so I thought I knew everything.
Yeah,
so you went there on like a film scholarship?
I went to writing school. Because I had made a choice when I was young that I didn't want to like ever depend on anyone else to be creative. So I was not even like really ever like a child writer, but I just wanted to learn to write, to tell my own stories, so I could make the things that I wanted to make without didn't like the idea that like as a director you have to wait for a writer to. So I just kind of I decided instead of going to film school I would go to writing school. So that's what happened.
Interesting. So we learned.
See, you don't know everything.
Don't know anything. Which is actually interesting. I would rather talk about films that you directed. That's kind of interesting that then you went on from there to write Kids, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's the only film that you've ever written and not directed, correct? Or are there other ones?
I wrote another one called Ken Park.
Oh, right. Ken
I've
Park.
still never seen it, but I wrote
You've never seen Ken Park?
Not yet. One day.
One day.
I'll watch it with you.
All right, let's move on. The first film that you directed was called Gummo, and I believe it screened this week. It's been touted as one of cinema's masterpieces, which I always find amazing and hilarious and beautiful, and correct. It's at the time that I think you were 21, right, when you made that film, and I'm just kind of curious, like, to have a film come out. Most young artists kind of do a bunch of shitty work, crappy work early on and kind of hone their skills and then kind of grow into their career. Not that you haven't grown into your career, but you were like right out of the gate. You kind of hit it out of the park. And I'm kind of curious, like, what was your thinking going into making that film? Because it was such a unique signature on it. It didn't feel like any other film that had ever been made. And, being 21 years old to be able to make, do you think it had something to do with you were so young? You didn't give a damn? Or like, can you talk a bit about your process in that?
I actually, it's weird. I really probably cared more about that than anything else. I mean, I care always about everything, but I think like because I hadn't done anything, if I can remember, because it was so long ago, it's like a childhood memory at this point. But if I can remember it, I really cared, like because it was the first film, and also because I was seeing movies differently or films different, just images in a different way. And it was such a specific thing that I wanted to do. So I cared so much. And it kind of made me crazy at the time. I was probably already. But and then I had no real reference for how to make films. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I'd gone through the process of watching Kids, but I had no reference to besides that, it was really it. And so, and with this, it was the whole narrative style was so different. So it was caring a lot, but then also at the same time, like not giving a fuck. It was like a kind of equal, it was equal, but I really wanted to make a great movie. Like in my mind, I was obsessed with the idea that it would be, at least that it would contain, there would be something great about it, that it would contain something special. And so, but I did care a lot.
Do you remember? I know it was a long time ago. Can you talk about your writing process on that film? Because it's it's such a disjointed, non-linear approach to writing. And so, like, do you remember sitting down and being like, okay, this is how we're going to do this?
It was weird because I didn't know any other writers. Like, I grew up in Nashville. I didn't know any screenwriters. I really didn't know movie people at all. So I didn't have like a reference point. It's like, you learn later, this is how this guy works. This is how long it takes. At that point, you're a kid and you kind of don't know, and it's in some ways it's more interesting. And so like with the movie Kids, I had no idea how long it was supposed to take you to write a movie, so I just wrote it in a week. I just wrote one draft. I didn't even know what it was about. I just wrote it. It was like stream of consciousness, and then turned it in, and then it became that movie. And then with Gummo, because it wasn't a linear story, so I wrote it closer to like how you would write like a collage. Basically, they would start with the sequences would start with images that I wanted to see. They were and I would put them on cue cards, and then there would be like photographs that didn't exist, that were just descriptions, and then behind the scenes, I would come up with characters, and then behind the scenes, I would write the drama. So behind the image, I would write the sequence. So it would be like a boy with rabbit ears sits on a toilet and plays the accordion. Two boys on bicycles ride down the street looking for dogs to kill. And it was just like it was like images like that, and then I would assemble them in a way because I wasn't trying to make something that was necessarily dramatic, but I was trying to make something that replicated the device of this idea of a tornado. And so I wanted the fragmentation of, I wanted the narrative to be fragmented like that, with images kind of falling from the sky. And that's why, so I wrote the script, but it was impossible for most people to read. I would give it to people and they would just be like, quit after the 10th page.
Yeah.
Because however strange it was to watch, it was also even stranger probably for someone to be reading that stuff. And they didn't know how it all added up and where it was going. So by the time I'd gotten the money to film it, a lot of it was, I would go out to the locations and I would have all these different cameras and I would give them to different people, and we would just, I wanted to shoot everything that was around. I wanted to shoot the world, and then in the edit I wanted to kind of make sense of it, or kind of orbit it and kind of around this narrative.
It's so interesting, that tornado metaphor. I never thought about that, but that makes perfect sense.
So it's a tornado metaphor because, and it takes place in Xenia, Ohio. Xenia, Ohio was the place where the biggest tornado in American history smacked into in the 70s. And like Bob Hope did all these like telethons for Xenia. And then also Xenia coincided with Alien Workshop. And
Which is a skateboard company.
And the memory screen videos that as a kid that I loved so much. And so I kind of just, it felt like a kind of metaphor, but also just like, it was just an interesting location. I felt like it was like a secret. And
it wasn't shot in Xenia,
we shot it in Nashville, but it takes place there.
Right.
But anyway, the tornado, that's a lot.
Yeah. Being that was your first film, I'm curious, like how has your process over the course of the films that you've made since then changed, and how much is it the same in terms of, like, say, when you went down to start The Beach Bum, your last feature? Like, how is your process different from when you sat down to write Gummo, besides the fact that you're an established artist and a grown man?
Well, grown. I guess it's just like you do something more, like I was an amateur, so you don't know. It's a great place to be too. In some ways it's the best place when you just don't know the rules, because it's like you're so free. But also I was like, at that age I was very like emotional, and I spent a lot of I didn't know how to control like my anger. I didn't know, like, because you get frustrated when things don't look or turn out the way you want, and I was so like, and so I was spending a lot of my like natural energy at the time angry, just because I felt like that's how I had to be, or I was obsessed, but I wasn't necessarily. It was very difficult for me to like contain it. Where now it's like I've gotten to a point where I kind of know how to function. Making movies or art, or where you can figure out how to function. You can figure out how to slip and slide and still get what you want, and kind of conserve your creative energy, because it's kind of like a marathon making movies.
So do you think that your practice has evolved more as like for self-care, for like self-preservation?
I mean,
rather than
no, you just do something more. You just understand it more. I understand cameras more. I understand like how to deal with actors. I understand like the rhythms of shooting and sets, and how to in the beginning you just don't know. You have to just figure. It's like you're like thrown to the wolves, or at least that's the way I was, because I just was like, I just never had. I just had to figure it out. And now I've done enough things at different lengths and stuff. I know what I'm getting into. But it's always like I use pretty much the same techniques that I did then.
That's why I was curious. Can you give an example of something that?
I mean, I still just have a kind of. I still, with the movies, I'm not really concerned with like continuity or time in a traditional sense. I always gravitate towards things that are more energy based, or like I say, like a liquid narrative, things that have a kind of it's more about a feeling rather than a kind of continuity. And so over the years, the films have gotten probably less and less and more free in that way.
Now you will shoot the same scene in different locations.
Yeah, I shoot the same scenes over and over again. Like one scene, I shoot it over and over again, like in just different locations. It's never the same, and it's always just because like I just never like the idea of like locking myself into a moment, and I like that I can like I like that I can draw a sequence out over the course of like 2 or 3 locations, and just it's more exciting to me. But yeah, it's just something that I developed over the last couple of years.
And was that something? Did you read something about that, or you just popped into your head?
Yeah.
Like, why don't we do it like that?
I just I started playing around with that in advertising.
Mm.
So like when I would do things like in advertising 10 years ago or something, technically, then I was like, oh, this is interesting, because I was like, you could actually tell a story in this way. It's disjointed in some ways, but also I could tell this, instead of us being like here, having this conversation back and forth, and the camera just going dun dun dun. We can have the same conversation. It can start outside, then we can cut to like us walking through, up to the curtain, having the conversation, and then it finishes with us here. And it says, I was like, it could be the same part of the conversation, but it just takes place over. And then I was like, I wonder if I can do that with movies. And then I started thinking of movies in more, and art in general, in more terms of a sensory. It was more like a kind of a feeling, right? As opposed to, or something that you could feel. It's more tactile, more like something that it goes through you, an energy, rather than it being like a story. I don't really, I don't so much care about like what you would call conventional stories. It's never really interested me, or conventional narrative. It's more like in energy that I like.
It's interesting though you talk about story, because I want to talk about your characters, because there's one thing that I've noticed throughout all of your work, not just in film but also in art and in writing different things, that you have always been attracted to telling stories of people who are underdogs. And when I say underdogs, I mean people who characters who have like mental deficiencies, maybe something wrong with their brain, maybe they're not attractive. A lot of times they're not attractive. I mean, they've gotten more attractive as they've gotten bigger actors. The people who I think that really struggle, the people who are different, who really struggle in life, and I think that it's a through line, I think, through all of your work in a weird way. It's like the celebration of the outsider, And I'm curious about that. If you're aware of that, if you tangibly think about that, do you consider yourself an outsider?
I mean, I don't really consider myself ever. Like, I don't even try. I don't really consider myself. But the thing that the outsider thing, it really just popped up. It really just. I never set out to like make films about that. Where I grew up, there were a lot of strange people, and I was raised on a commune, and then grew up like out in the country, and then moved to Nashville. There's a lot of interesting. It was a lot of interesting people around when I was growing up, and characters and stuff. So my parents were characters, and like you gravitate towards that. And then also there's an inherent, I find let's call them like dreamers. There's an inherent drama and even a tragedy to a lot of those characters, because sometimes the people, they're most creative, the most outside, the kind of inventing their own reality, the freest people are also the ones find themselves in the most jeopardy. And so there's just this kind of like inherent drama that kind of follows characters like that. But I always like people, not even movies, just in general in life. Like, I love people who just do what they want to do, that kind of follow their own like rhythms. Like, no one's like, this is the way you're supposed to live, and this is what you're doing. You're supposed to this, and this. You follow this. It's like, why? It's also fun to like do this other thing. So I try to make the movies that kind of about characters like that.
Because you think that they're just good stories. Do you feel any kind of responsibility to kind of champion the cause of it? No.
No, I don't. But they're just more, for me, it's more fun to watch. like everything is so corporatized now, and so like in the characters and films and art and everything, you're so conditioned to like they say certain things, they act a certain way. You know, there's going to be a kind of redemption. There's like arcs to people. It's almost like in your DNA that like you come to expect these certain things, and I've always found it irritating, and so you know I like when movies just end. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't believe that people. I don't really believe in this idea of like trying to like find yourself. I think you just like go out there and it just happens. And so I like character, you know, I like people that kind of just do their own. They get into trouble, but they, you know, they're like living their own lives.
There's something, I won't push you after this, I won't push you on this anymore. But there's something in you that I can just say as someone who's watched you grow over the years in your work, that you see those characters in a way that is totally different from the way most people see. Like we were talking before about these Instagram apps that where you can change your face to make yourself look beautiful. And it's almost like your films are like the app that like change your face to make you look ugly.
Right.
You know, I mean, like I'm not saying, not exactly that, but like where it's like that becomes the ideal in a weird way, where you almost look at those people as like, didn't you once say that they're like those are like God's masterpieces?
Maybe, yeah.
You know?
Maybe, you know, I don't know. You just
They're like people like with Down syndrome are God's masterpieces.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, I just that'd be a funny quote.
You did say that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like anything else. You're just attracted to what you're attracted to.
We'll drop it. Since we're in this beautiful Gucci theater and you're head to toe Gucci, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about costume, because we have never talked about that. And your all of your films and pretty much all your work across the board is so heavily driven by clothing. Your characters are really, the stories are told as much by what they're wearing than as the location or even what they're saying. So I was kind of curious about when you're starting off writing a film, how much do you think about what they're wearing, the clothing, the wardrobe? Because, you know, throughout your, it's kind of amazing like that you've actually done it, but then actually like a few of your films have actually gone on to start like significant fashion trends.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're going for that, but it's kind of interesting to like.
It always makes me laugh. It's like everything. You paint a picture, right? So you know, you see people wear certain things. I never really think about it in terms of fashion. It's mostly just there's certain things that characters wear or people wear. Sometimes, you know, and in order to paint the picture, because I really want with the films, like everything, you want people to feel like they're in that world. Like I really want you to like be able to like imagine that like for the 2 hours you saw the film, it's like you were in that place. And so obviously clothes, costumes, locations. I hope that the tonality of the image is as important as the story, or almost as important as the story. So yeah, it's definitely a part of it.
When you're beginning a project, do you pull like wardrobe references and do you have like a whole like thing going about how these people should look?
Definitely. Yeah, like with the last movie.
Yeah, could you give an
Matthew
example like on Beach Bum?
Character, the Beach Bum, it's very similar to a specific type of a guy that like that would hang out in the Keys and live on houseboats and like, you know, drink all day and smoke weed. He was just very like it was like a specific look that's like indigenous to that spot. Yeah, then you just kind of, and then maybe what I'll do is I'll push it into something hyper real. So it's real, but then pushed into something more designed or something. Probably. Yeah.
And like with Spring Breakers, the same kind of thing. Like
yeah, I mean, with that movie, we had collected like thousands of images of, you know, co-ed party images, you know, and teenage spring break imagery, and so it was really at that point like it was pretty easy because we were just like, this is exactly what it should look like. This is what the movie should look like. It's how the girls should dress their bikinis. Everything was kind of based on that.
At the same time, it's like you turned it up.
Yeah,
because it was
right.
that, but it didn't feel documentary at all. It felt, you know, it felt
because
like
you want it
fantasy.
to be. I try to, you know, you want the films to, or I want the films to be graphic, you know, or I want, you know, it's visual media. You want them to pop. So I try to maybe take what's real and then push it into something maybe hyper real or hyper magical or something that's a little bit more extreme. So, you know, with color, a lot of times it's just color, usage of color.
But a lot of times it is based on like real life, like real people, real things. Interesting. One more, and we talked about this a few, like in our last conversation in Los Angeles, but in cinema right now, in film, you know what I mean? Like everyone is so into 4K, HK, HD, the cleaner, the crisper, the image, but you still, even with Spring Breakers and the Beach Bomb, even though you're shooting on 35mm cameras over, there's teeth in the footage, and I'm just kind of curious about what is it about that, like analog, in Julian Donkey Boy, I think you said like you shot it on digital video, transferred it to Super 8, and then blew it up to 35.
Yeah, we shot on spy cameras and digital visual some years ago, and then blew it all up to Super 8 and then to 35mm.
And like
then color corrected.
And then so what was I just beyond the aesthetics, like there's gotta like what
you know, I grew up in movies. I grew up watching films. I love film, and I always think that like they're all like cameras, and you know the look. They're like instruments, and it's like really what instrument they each have a tone. They each have like a voice, and so I usually prefer to shoot things on film because it's more like alchemy. There's like grain structure to it. There's like there's like a magic to film. It's different. Videos also can, you know, you can do nice things also, but it's more, video is like there's hard edges, and like it's meant for people. It's meant not to be broken down. They like create video because they want to establish an image that's perfect. And so like if you're someone like me, I like to see soft edges, and I like the romance of film. I like breaking down. Like I said, the fog of analog. There's like a mystery to it. You know, I grew up like as a kid on VHS tapes and just reusing the same tape over and over again, and then like images bubbling up, and like you know, bad tracking and all those things that they mean something to me, and so yeah, that's generally what I gravitate towards. Film is always better though.
There's something about I don't know. It's like
video's good for sports. Like HD is like really good for like if you're like watching sport.
Yeah. It's interesting to me though, and just because you do use it so much, it's almost become a signature. And I wonder, like, are you conscious of it? Do you feel like there's some rebellion in that, in like being that like when everyone's making things that look a certain way, and this has become the industry standard to make things that are so clean and so crisp, and that like like it's still your way of like, you know, saying.
I mean,
like,
kind of. I guess it's not just what I like, but like it's true. It's like a lot of times you hear like, oh, everybody's using this camera. It's the best camera, and da-da. So I just will never use that camera. But I just don't. It might be the best camera. I just don't. I don't even want to like fuck around with it.
Because you don't want your films to look like.
I just don't. It's like everyone's using this one thing. It's like they'll use this one thing for the next 5 years, and then there'll be another thing that's better than that everyone else will use. And for me, film is perfect.
Let's change gears a little bit and just talk about, because you're also a practicing visual artist. You're also a writer. You're also a musician.
No, I'm just like,
hey, I've got an Absalom record.
I recorded this. I'm doing the new Kodak Black record. Just so you know, I produced all the beats on Kodak's record.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing. But no, you've written songs for Bjork. You've written songs for Lana Del Rey. You had a death metal band, Norwegian black metal.
I just don't know anything about anything. I just tried.
Anyway,
music's probably my worst thing.
Okay, man, you have something. I'm curious because you think musically, obviously.
Right.
You know, if you're doing if you're doing beats and all that, and how do you balance between all these different practices and mediums? Like, do they inform each other?
Yeah.
Like, as your art, do your paintings inform your films? Do your films, you know,
Yeah.
inform something you're writing, a poem or something like that,
It's
or
all
an
the same,
advertisement,
it's all the
or
same
like,
thing. It really is all the same. It is like I felt like that ever since I was a kid. I was a teenager, just making things in my bedroom. It all just felt the same. It was like if I sang a song into a micro cassette recorder, drew a picture, wrote a a poem. It all really just was the same thing. And then you put them up against each other, and there was some type of I liked the relationship. They all came from the same place. And then really early on, I just never tried to differentiate or give any work a hierarchy. Like I don't necessarily like this one thing more than this thing, or think this is important. I've learned in my life that like a lot of times the biggest ideas, for me at least, like the biggest come from like the smallest things. So like taking a photograph of something in my backyard. Well, I see something else or on the street or something, and I'm like, oh, it's amazing. That could be a movie, or that could be a painting, or that could be, and then it starts to like snowball. I just always kind of felt like there was a relationship to everything. The most important thing though is that like I switch so much because also one thing stops becoming fun and then another thing becomes fun. And like I am a big proponent of like thinking that like art should or making work shouldn't be drudgery.
right.
Like it should be. It doesn't mean it's always fun because there's things that are hard and difficult, but you should be excited about it. So when I feel myself like kind of like getting bored of a certain, I'll try this. I'll go into this. I'll try this, and I just always just try things. And everything is not always successful. But a long time ago, I felt like it was all perfect. It's like the way it's meant to be. It doesn't mean it always has to be the best thing, but it's always it's like you just trying, which is important, just to always try.
When I think of you, I think of there's that old adage that they say, "Jack of all trades, master of none." And you're like one of the people in my life I know who's proven that wrong. And anytime anyone says it since then, I'm just like, well, you don't know Harmony.
I mean, I just was always like I never understood even what's so wrong about failing. Like I just don't understand. Like people they're always like, oh, it didn't work, or this wasn't such a good show, or this wasn't. It's always like a big deal. So you just go on and you like make something else. Like, but how do you ever get to that point where you're making good things if you're not failing? Like it's part of the process. Like the process is, and some people, in my experience, some people will say, this is the greatest thing you've done. This is the da-da-da-da. And then literally the next thing you read, this is the worst thing he's done. Or this is the thing. So then it's like, in the end, you realize that like none of it really matters. Like all that matters is like you try your best. You try to make the most beautiful thing you can. You put it out into the world, and then you just keep going. And you you wish for the best. And then you just keep going. And I don't even know what's good and I just am trying. And then at the end of your life, at the end of your career, you've created a body of work that's significant, that has beauty, and it was entertaining for people, and then a diversion while you were on the planet before you croak. Yeah,
We can kind of end it there, right?
Yeah, Milan, fuck it up.
It's funny because Trash Humpers, the film that you guys are about to watch, when it first came out, it was acted to that way. Like,
Yeah,
what a piece of garbage. But now it's like considered one of your like most famous films, and people love it, and it's been written about.
Yeah, I mean,
by like cinema theory people.
This movie, I would say 70% of the audience would walk out within the first 10 minutes.
For sure. The reviews were terrible.
Yeah, but Gummo was like that, and a lot of film. I'm used to it.
Slow burns. I want to talk really quickly about the book. There's a book signing after this. I don't know if you guys know, and there's an exhibition about the book project that you just did with Gucci and Kaleidoscope.
Yes.
It's pretty wild.
Yes.
It seems like it's in the vein of kind of what you're doing with Beach Bum. Like it's in this Florida thing, but like it's also different. So I'm kind of curious if you could just talk about what.
Yeah, the book's cool. It's a collaboration with Gucci, and like we just really like we shot most of it in Pompeii, and I shot some other stuff around my house in Miami. But like it's a kind of it's like a kind of mashup, drawings and collage, and a lot of messing around with colors and imagery, and it's kind of it was a really fun project. It was great.
Feels like an interesting fusion
Yeah, of styles.
Of styles and also of like
yeah,
putting film, like cinema and
in
fine art
Pompeii
together.
was cool, and doing those colors in Pompeii and stuff, and then doing the thing with the magazine, Kaleidoscope.
Um, so I think this is my last question, then maybe we could open up for questions if anyone has any questions. And you kind of already answered this question, but I just always have to say it at the end, especially because it seems like there's a lot of people in this audience that are young artists that seem to be starting their careers. So what, and I know it's like the most cliche question in the world, but like, what's your advice to someone who's like trying to like create a unique voice in this very treacherous artistic world that we exist in right now?
Yeah, don't be precious. Just go for it. Just don't listen to anybody. Just do your best. Just eat up the world, lick it, snort it, fuck it. Just have fun. I just think if you're gonna make something, you know, really try to make it your own. Think about what exists, and then think about what you can add and contribute to the greater good. And if you're really passionate about it, you can't give up. You just got to make something great. Keep going. Yeah, Milan.
Yeah, Milan. Do we have time for questions?
Now we have time for questions. If you are open to question, is there any question? Happy to pass you the microphone. Or I have the first one, if I may. In the last 4 days, we have been exposed to a series of movies that inspired your career. Can you tell me when and where you bumped into those movies?
Those were like when I was selecting films, because I wanted you guys to play movies that I didn't think play that often in Italy, and there were a lot of them are like kind of, I would call them new, in my opinion, like new classics or films that like, or my generation were like maybe not critically beloved, but were like had a big impact on myself and my friends. You know, movies like you know Cheech and Chong film. Maybe it's Cheech and Chong movies. I don't know how big they were here, but when I was growing up, there was like a huge. They were like a phenomenon. A movie like Weekend at Bernie's. It's like. It's maybe not like it's maybe not like a critically, but if you watch that movie now, Weekend at Bernie's is pretty radical, and the storyline is there's a dead guy at a party and just hanging out, and I feel like it was just a mix of movies that I thought that you got Pichote, which Hector Babenco film was one of my favorite movies ever. Brazilian movie.
Wasn't that kind of an influence on Gummo also?
Yeah, I mean, Pichote was I still think it's probably that and Night of the Hunter are like maybe the two greatest films, maybe. But yeah, it was shot in 1980 in Brazil with all street kids. Most of the kids after the film were executed by the death squads, by the Brazilian death squads. So like, but it's a very special, like it's a movie that like exists to me in its own space. It's so out there, it's almost hard to believe it even was ever made. Strozak, Herzog film was like another seminal movie to me with Bruno S., one of my favorite screen presence of all time. Every Which Way But Loose, the Clint Eastwood film, I loved it. Like any movie with Clint Eastwood and an orangutan, it's like as good as it gets. What else? Murmur of the Heart. I think the Louis Malle film. That's a really good movie. I don't know. I'm forgetting.
That's all.
Heat with Burt Reynolds. The Burt Reynolds Heat. It's a funny story because I originally programmed the Michael Mann Heat, and they somehow ended up getting the Burt Reynolds one. But I also love that movie too. And that movie was seen by even less people. I mean, and so when they asked me if I wanted to change it, I actually thought, no, it's a better choice. So we're showing the Burt Reynolds version of Heat, which coincidentally was shot in Miami and Venice, Italy. So it actually worked out.
I find it interesting to think with the amount of time between now and your earlier films, as the idea that your aesthetic is now itself somewhat a part of the establishment. And you were saying even, you've set off fashion trends, and I'm sure you've also set off many trends in filmmaking as well. So firstly, my question is, how do you feel about that? And secondly is, where do you look today for inspiration yourself?
That's a good question. I'm happy about it. Like, I'm always happy when you make work and it eventually it affects the culture in some way. It makes me. I'm happy about it. I don't think about it. I truly try not to think about at least I don't think about I'm not thinking about where everything fits in or how it works or whatever. I just kind of hope that eventually people will find it, and that at some point in some point in time people will enjoy it. Where do I get influence? Where I think mostly from living life now, living life and just I don't really get it from one source. It comes from art. It comes from real life. It comes from seeing some clip on YouTube. It comes from a movie. I don't know. It's all everything's so fragmented now. So you just get it where it comes.
1 second.
I have a question for you on Spring Breakers, which I consider one of the most troubling and unsettling movies of the beginning of this 21st century. One of the most interesting things I found in that movie was your choice of repeating scenes, dialogues, and so on in different parts of the movies, and this is one of the things that, according to me, produces this feeling of strangeness on the viewer. I would like if you could explain how and why you choose this method, which is quite particular.
I was trying to make that movie closer to some a drug experience. When I was saying before, something that was more sensory, something that felt like it was work going through you. And in a way, it was closer to I wasn't really thinking about other movies as much as music and certain types of music and pop music or electronic music or things that were sample and loop-based things that had a repetition in chorus, and that there were hooks. And so I was playing around with the idea of, how are you going to make a movie with a hook? How does it work? Is it possible to repeat sequences in a way? It was more, in some ways, me playing around with the idea of sample-based, loop-based film, but it was based on music, closer to music. Because I wanted it to I wanted to be the experience to be jarring and a little bit physical. So that's kind of where it came. But honestly, when I started making that movie, I had no idea if that was going to work. It was really, I used to wake up in sweat. I was covered in sweat the first 10 days before I'd cut anything, because I had I thought it really could turn out badly.
Thank you.
Any other question? No. So okay, thanks.
Thank you, Milan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gucci, for setting it up. It's beautiful. You want to say anything, Milan?
So thank you guys. And as Aaron was saying, after the projection that you're gonna see now is the last screening, that is gonna be Trash Humpers. Everybody is more than welcome to join us at Spazio Maiocchi, Via Maiocchi 7, where we're gonna host a party for all night long. Basically, can you confirm all night long with your neighborhoods? Okay, great. Okay, thank you everybody. Enjoy the movie.